Hello there, and welcome to Whispers of Science, where wonder gets cozy and the cosmos takes the scenic route to understanding. Tonight's gentle journey ventures into one of the most mind bending concepts that modern physics has dared to whisper about: the multiverse, an infinite tapestry of realities where every possibility, every choice, every quantum flutter creates entire universes beyond our own. It's a place where science meets philosophy, where mathematics dances with imagination, and where the very notion of everything becomes beautifully overwhelming. But before we drift into these parallel worlds, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what reality brought you here? Fitting, isn't it? A video about infinite realities, and here we are, each arriving from our own unique corner of existence. If you find this cosmic voyage soothing, thought provoking, or simply a lovely way to unwind after navigating your own slice of reality, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave the video a gentle like and perhaps subscribed. It helps this quiet corner of curiosity reach others who might need a peaceful pause from their universe too. Now, I do hope this isn't so fascinating that it keeps you awake, but if it does, well, at least you'll drift off knowing something extraordinary about the nature of existence itself. So settle in, slow your thoughts, and let's begin, because somewhere between what we know and what we can barely imagine lies the whispered possibility that our universe is just one note in an infinite cosmic symphony. The idea that we might be living in just one of countless universes sounds like something pulled from the pages of science fiction, doesn't it yet? Here we are in the 21st century with some of our brightest minds seriously contemplating whether reality as we know it is merely a single thread in an incomprehensibly vast cosmic weaving. The multiverse hypothesis suggests that our observable universe, the one containing everything we've ever seen, touched, or dreamed about, might be just one bubble in an endless sea of bubbles, each containing its own stars, planets, laws of physics, and perhaps even its own versions of you. But let's start gently with what we can touch and feel. Our universe, the one we call home, is already mind bogglingly enormous, containing roughly 2 trillion galaxies, each housing billions of stars, many with their own planetary families. When we gaze up at the night sky, we're seeing photons that have traveled unimaginable distances across space and time, carrying stories from the depths of cosmic history. Yet, according to multiverse theories, this entire observable universe, our cosmic neighborhood stretching 93 billion light years across, might be nothing more than a grain of sand on an infinite beach. How did we arrive at such a staggering possibility? Well, it began, as many profound ideas do, with curious minds, asking uncomfortable questions about the nature of reality itself. Physicists noticed something peculiar about our universe. It seems remarkably fine tuned for the existence of complexity, life, and consciousness. The fundamental constants that govern how particles interact, how stars form, and how chemistry unfolds appear to be set with extraordinary precision change. Any one of these values by even the tiniest amount, and the universe becomes a very different place, perhaps one where stars never ignite, where atoms never bind, or where galaxies never coalesce into the beautiful cosmic structures we observe today. This cosmic fine-tuning puzzle led some scientists to wonder, could there be other universes out there with different settings, different constants, different rules entirely? And if so, we might simply find ourselves in the one universe where the settings happen to allow for observers like us to exist and ponder these very questions. It's a bit like winning the cosmic lottery, except instead of one lottery, there might be infinite lotteries running simultaneously with every possible combination of numbers being drawn somewhere. The mathematics that describe our universe have also whispered hints about the possibility of other realities. Equations in quantum mechanics suggest that particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until they're observed, a phenomenon called superposition. But what happens to all those other potential states? Some interpretations propose that they don't simply vanish. Instead, they branch off, creating parallel realities where every possible outcome actually occurs. Imagine flipping a coin in our universe. It lands heads, but somewhere in another branch of reality, it landed tails, and both outcomes are equally real, equally valid. This branching idea extends to every quantum event happening everywhere all the time, every particle interaction, every radioactive decay, every moment. When probability collapses into a single observed outcome, potentially spawns countless parallel universes where the other possibilities play out. It's like reality is constantly forking, creating an ever expanding tree of existence where every branch represents a different version of history, a different way things could have unfolded. But quantum mechanics isn't the only pathway leading us toward multiverse thinking cosmology. The study of the universe as a whole has stumbled upon its own reasons to suspect we're not alone in existence. The theory of cosmic inflation suggests that our universe underwent a period of extraordinarily rapid expansion in its earliest moments, stretching space itself at speeds that would make light seem sluggish. This inflationary period could explain many features of our observable universe, but it also raises intriguing possibilities. If inflation happened once, could it happen again and again? Perhaps inflation never truly stopped, but continues in regions beyond our cosmic horizon, creating pocket universes, bubble universes, each with its own Big Bang, its own expansion, its own unique properties. These bubble universes would be causally disconnected from ours, meaning no information or influence could ever pass between them. They would be as unreachable as they are real existing parallel to our own cosmic story. String theory, that elegant attempt to describe all fundamental forces and particles as vibrations of tiny one dimensional strings, also hints at multiplicity. The mathematics of string theory require additional spatial dimensions beyond the three we experience daily. These extra dimensions might be compactified, rolled up in ways we can't directly perceive. But the manner in which they're compactified could vary from region to region, creating what physicists call the landscape, a vast space of possible universes, each with different physical laws, different particle properties, different fundamental structures. In this string landscape, our universe would occupy just one point among perhaps 10 to the 500th power possible configurations. That's a number so large it makes the number of atoms in our observable universe seem quaint by comparison. Each point in this landscape represents a potential universe with its own unique character, its own story, its own possibilities for complexity and perhaps consciousness. The implications are staggering. If the multiverse is real, then everything that can happen does happen somewhere. There are universes where the dinosaurs never went extinct, where you chose a different career path, where the laws of physics allow for magic like phenomena, where the very concept of impossibility has no meaning. There might be universes where conscious beings evolved from completely different chemical foundations, where mathematics works differently, where the speed of light has a different value, where gravity repels instead of attracts. Some of these universes might be subtly different from ours, with histories that diverged at crucial moments. Others might be so alien that we couldn't even recognize them as containing anything resembling reality as we understand it. There could be universes where space has 4 or 5 or 17 dimensions, where time flows backward, where the concept of existence itself takes on meanings we can't fathom. Yet, for all its mind expanding implications, the multiverse remains tantalizingly beyond direct observation by definition. If other universes exist, they're separated from ours in ways that prevent any direct interaction or communication. We can't send probes to other realities. We can't receive signals from parallel worlds. We can't even be certain that the concept of evidence as we understand it applies to something so fundamentally beyond our experimental reach. This creates a fascinating tension within the scientific community. Some argue that if a theory can't be tested, it isn't really science, but rather philosophy or mathematics dressed up in scientific language. Others contend that the multiverse hypothesis emerges so naturally from our best theories of physics that dismissing it would be like ignoring an obvious conclusion simply because it's inconvenient or untestable. The debate touches on deep questions about the nature of scientific knowledge itself. What constitutes evidence when dealing with ideas that transcend the boundaries of possible observation? How do we distinguish between mathematical beauty and physical truth when our equations seem to demand the existence of things we can never directly confirm? As we stand at this crossroads between the known and the unknowable, between the observable and the theoretical, we find ourselves confronting questions that stretch the very limits of human understanding. The multiverse challenges our assumptions about uniqueness, causality, and the nature of existence itself. It suggests that our cosmic home might be both infinitely special as the only reality we can ever truly know, and utterly ordinary as just one among countless others. Whether we ever find definitive proof of other universes or not, the very act of contemplating the multiverse changes something fundamental about how we see ourselves and our place in the grand scheme of things. It whispers to us that reality might be far stranger, far more abundant than we ever dared imagine, and perhaps that's enough to make the journey worthwhile. But let's pause for a moment and consider what it might feel like to live in a multiverse where infinite versions of yourself exist right now. As you listen to these words, there could be countless other versions of you making slightly different choices, living slightly different lives and realities that branch away from ours, like leaves on an endless tree. Some versions might be nearly identical to you, differing only in the smallest details. Perhaps in one universe, you chose tea instead of coffee this morning, or took a different route to work. In others, the differences might be more profound. Maybe there's a version of you who became a professional musician instead of pursuing your current path, or one who never met the people who became most important in your life. These parallel selves aren't just philosophical abstractions, they're potentially as real as you are right now, living their own stories, experiencing their own joys and struggles, completely unaware of your existence, just as you remain unaware of theirs. The thought can be both comforting and unsettling on one hand. It suggests that every path not taken, every opportunity missed, every what if that keeps you awake at night is being explored somewhere by another version of you. There's a universe where you made that bold decision you've been contemplating, where you took that risk, where you said yes instead of no, or no instead of yes. In this sense, the multiverse becomes a kind of cosmic safety net, ensuring that no possibility goes unexplored, no story goes untold. But this same abundance can feel overwhelming if every choice creates new universes, if every moment branches into infinite possibilities. Then how do we find meaning in our particular branch of reality? How do we make peace with the choices we've made when somewhere else we made different ones? How do we cherish the relationships we have when infinite other versions exist in parallel realities? Perhaps the answer lies not in the vastness of what might be, but in the intimacy of what is the universe. You inhabit this reality. Your experiencing right now remains uniquely yours, regardless of how many parallel versions might exist elsewhere. Your consciousness, your memories, your particular perspective on existence belongs to this branch of reality alone, and that makes it precious beyond measure. The multiverse might also offer a different way of thinking about loss and grief. When someone we love dies, or when a cherished possibility ends, it can feel like a profound severing, like something has been torn from the fabric of reality itself. But in a multiverse, those we've lost continue to exist in other realities, living full lives, making new memories, experiencing joy and wonder in ways we can barely imagine. Death becomes not an ending, but a kind of branching where we lose contact with certain versions of people while they continue their stories elsewhere. This perspective doesn't diminish the reality of loss or the importance of grieving. It simply suggests that the universe might be more generous with existence than we previously thought, more willing to preserve what we hold dear even when we can no longer access it directly. It's a bit like knowing that somewhere a beautiful song continues to play, even after we've walked out of hearing range. The music hasn't stopped, we've simply moved beyond its reach. The implications extend beyond personal loss to encompass larger questions about meaning and purpose. If the multiverse is real, then every possible story gets told somewhere. Every conceivable form of beauty gets created. Every potential expression of love gets lived out. This doesn't make our particular story less meaningful, but rather places it within a context of infinite creativity and possibility. We might think of ourselves as authors in a cosmic library where every possible book exists. Our job isn't to write every story that's already being done across the multiverse. Instead, we're responsible for crafting our particular narrative with care, attention, and love, making it as beautiful and meaningful as we can within the constraints and opportunities of our specific reality. The multiverse also raises profound questions about ethics and responsibility. If every choice creates new realities, does that diminish the importance of the choices we make here and now, or does it amplify them? Some philosophers argue that if infinite versions of every action exist, then nothing we do ultimately matters, since every possibility plays out somewhere regardless. But others contend that this makes our choices more important, not less. Because while every possibility might exist somewhere, the particular combination of choices you make creates a unique path through the multiverse that no one else can walk your specific sequence of decisions. Your particular way of navigating existence creates a reality that wouldn't exist without your conscious participation. Think of it like painting. If every possible painting exists somewhere in the multiverse, that doesn't make the act of painting meaningless. Instead, it makes each brushstroke an act of selection, a choice to bring one particular vision into being within your accessible reality. The multiverse might contain every possible painting, but only you can create the specific masterpiece that emerges from your unique perspective and experience. As we drift deeper into these contemplations, we begin to see that the multiverse isn't just a scientific hypothesis, it's a lens through which we can examine fundamental questions about identity consciousness and the nature of existence itself. It challenges us to think beyond the boundaries of our immediate experience, while simultaneously highlighting the irreplaceable value of that experience. The concept also invites us to practice a kind of cosmic humility. If we're just one reality among infinite others, then perhaps our certainties about how things should be become a bit softer, our judgments a bit more gentle, our wonders at existence itself a bit more profound after all. If the multiverse teaches us anything, it's that reality is far more creative, far more abundant than any single perspective can encompass. And yet, even as we contemplate infinite realities, we remain grounded in this one, the coffee cooling beside you, the evening light filtering through your window, the particular arrangement of thoughts and feelings that constitute your consciousness right now. These immediate experiences don't become less real or less important in a multiverse. They become the anchor that keeps you connected to your specific thread in the cosmic weaving. In many ways, the multiverse represents the ultimate expression of nature's apparent love affair with diversity and abundance. Everywhere we look, from the vast variety of galaxies to the intricate complexity of ecosystems to the rich tapestry of human cultures, we see a universe that seems to delight in exploring every possible way of being. The multiverse simply extends this pattern to its logical extreme, suggesting that reality itself is an endless exploration of possibility. As we continue our gentle journey through these ideas, we might find ourselves developing what we could call multiverse mindfulness, an awareness that this moment, this choice, this experience is both one among infinite others and absolutely unique in its particular configuration. It's a perspective that can make ordinary moments feel extraordinary, not because they're the only moments that exist, but because they're the only moments we can directly experience and influence. This mindfulness doesn't require us to believe in the multiverse with absolute certainty. The beauty of the concept lies not in its provability, but in its capacity to expand our sense of wonder and possibility. Whether other universes exist or not, contemplating their potential existence can shift something fundamental in how we approach our daily lives, making us more appreciative of the reality we inhabit while remaining curious about the vast unknown that surrounds it. So let's take a moment to explore some of the specific ways physicists have tried to peek behind the cosmic curtain and glimpse evidence of other realities. One of the most intriguing approaches involves looking for subtle signatures in the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang that still bathes our universe in faint radiation. This ancient light carries within it tiny fluctuations, patterns that tell the story of our universe's earliest moments, and some researchers have wondered whether these patterns might bear the fingerprints of collisions with other bubble universes. Imagine two soap bubbles floating through the air and occasionally bumping into each other. The collision leaves a mark on each bubble's surface, a slight distortion that speaks to the encounter. If our universe is indeed a bubble in a vast multiverse ocean, then perhaps long ago it collided with neighboring bubbles, leaving behind subtle imprints in the cosmic microwave background that we might still detect today. Several research teams have claimed to find such anomalies, unusual cold spots, or unexpected alignments in the background radiation, though the scientific community remains divided on whether these represent genuine multiverse signatures or simply the kind of statistical quirks that inevitably appear when you analyze vast amounts of data. Another fascinating approach involves the apparent acceleration of our universe's expansion, dark energy. That mysterious force pushing galaxies apart at an ever increasing rate remains one of the deepest puzzles in cosmology. But some theories suggest that this acceleration might be influenced by the presence of other universes nearby. Imagine our universe as a membrane floating in a higher dimensional space, alongside countless other membrane universes. Gravitational interactions between these branes could potentially explain why our universe's expansion is speeding up rather than slowing down as we might expect. The search for multiverse evidence also extends into the quantum realm, where physicists are exploring whether certain interpretations of quantum mechanics might leave observable traces. The many worlds interpretation suggests that quantum measurements cause reality to split into parallel branches. But what if these splits aren't perfectly clean? What if there's some kind of quantum leakage between branches that we could potentially detect? Some researchers have proposed looking for tiny violations of quantum mechanics, subtle deviations from predicted probabilities that might hint at interference from parallel realities. But perhaps one of the most profound implications of multiverse thinking isn't found in cosmic radiation or quantum measurements, but in the very existence of mathematical truths themselves. Why does mathematics work so well at describing our universe? Why do abstract mathematical concepts discovered through pure reasoning turn out to have such precise correspondences with physical reality? Some philosophers and physicists suggest that mathematics might be universal, not just to our reality, but to all possible realities, that mathematical truths transcend any single universe and provide a kind of common language that connects all branches of the multiverse. This idea leads to what some call the mathematical universe hypothesis. The notion that our physical reality is mathematics, that at the deepest level, what we experience as matter, energy, space, and time are actually mathematical structures playing out their logical implications. If this is true, then every possible mathematical structure might correspond to a real universe, somewhere in the vast space of possibilities. Our universe would be one particular mathematical object among infinitely many, each exploring different logical possibilities, different ways that abstract relationships can manifest as experienced reality. The implications ripple outward in surprising directions. If mathematics is the underlying fabric of all realities, then consciousness itself might be a mathematical phenomenon, a particular type of information processing pattern that can emerge wherever the right mathematical conditions are met. This would mean that consciousness isn't unique to biological brains, but could arise in any sufficiently complex mathematical structure. Anywhere in the multiverse, there might be forms of awareness so alien to our experience that we wouldn't recognize them as conscious at all, yet they would be every bit as real as our own inner lives. Consider what this might mean for our understanding of intelligence and creativity. If every possible mathematical relationship exists somewhere, then every possible thought, every conceivable idea, every potential work of art or music exists as a mathematical structure in some corner of the multiverse. When we think we're creating something new, we might actually be discovering something that already exists as an abstract mathematical possibility. Our creativity becomes a form of exploration, a way of navigating through the infinite landscape of mathematical truth. But this raises an ancient philosophical puzzle. If everything that can exist does exist somewhere in the multiverse, then what makes anything special? What gives meaning to choice, effort, or achievement? If every possible version of your life is playing out simultaneously, does it matter which particular path you follow here and now? These questions touch on some of the deepest issues in philosophy: the nature of free will, the source of meaning, the relationship between possibility and actuality. One way to approach these puzzles is through what philosophers call indexical thinking, just as the word here only has meaning relative to where you're standing. The significance of your choices and experiences comes from the fact that they're happening to you in your particular branch of reality. You can't experience all possible lives simultaneously. You can only live this one, and that limitation is what gives weight to each moment, each decision, each relationship you navigate. Think of it like reading a choose your own adventure book. Even though all possible storylines exist within the book's pages, you can only follow one path at a time. The choices you make determine which story you experience, and that experience remains meaningful regardless of how many other paths exist unexplored. The multiverse might contain every possible story, but you're still the protagonist of your particular narrative. This perspective suggests that meaning doesn't come from uniqueness, but from participation, from the active engagement of consciousness with possibility. Even if infinite versions of every choice exist, your specific sequence of choices creates a unique trajectory through possibility space that no one else can walk for you. The multiverse doesn't diminish the importance of your life. It provides an infinite context within which your particular story unfolds. The concept also invites us to reconsider our relationship with uncertainty and probability. In a single universe, random events feel genuinely unpredictable, genuinely open, but in a multiverse, every possible outcome of every probabilistic event actually occurs somewhere. The uncertainty we experience might not reflect genuine randomness in reality, but rather our inability to know which branch of the multiverse we'll find ourselves experiencing next. Imagine standing at a cosmic roulette wheel in a single universe. You don't know where the ball will land, but in a multiverse, the ball lands on every number simultaneously. You just don't know which outcome you'll observe from your particular vantage point. Uncertainty becomes less about what will happen and more about which happening. You'll witness this shift in perspective can be both liberating and vertiginous. Liberating because it suggests that every possibility gets its due somewhere, but vertiginous because it challenges our basic intuitions about the nature of chance and choice. The multiverse also offers a unique lens through which to examine the problem of suffering if this is the only reality. Then the existence of pain, loss, and injustice seems to demand explanation or justification. But in a multiverse context, suffering becomes one element in an infinite symphony of experience for every universe where tragedy strikes. There are countless others where it doesn't, for every reality. Where loss occurs, there are infinite realities where what was lost continues to flourish. This doesn't diminish the reality or importance of suffering in our particular universe, but it does place it within a larger context where every possible healing, every conceivable joy, every potential triumph over adversity also exists somewhere in the vast space of possibility. The multiverse becomes a kind of cosmic balancing act where every negative is paired with infinite positives, not as compensation, but as equally real expressions of what existence can contain. Some find this perspective comforting, while others find it troubling if every possible form of suffering exists somewhere alongside every possible form of joy. Does that make reality ultimately neutral, neither good nor evil, but simply complete in its exploration of all possibilities? Or does it suggest something even more profound, that reality is so generous with existence that it's willing to include even difficult experiences rather than exclude any possibility from the grand experiment? As we drift through these contemplations, we begin to see that the multiverse isn't just a scientific hypothesis, but a mirror in which we can examine our deepest assumptions about reality, identity, and meaning. It challenges us to think beyond the boundaries of our immediate experience, while simultaneously highlighting the irreplaceable importance of that experience. It suggests that we might be both infinitely common as one reality among countless others, and absolutely unique as the only version of reality we can directly know and influence. The beauty of multiverse thinking lies perhaps not in its truth or falsity, but in its capacity to expand our sense of wonder and possibility, whether other universes exist or not. Contemplating their potential existence enriches our relationship with the one universe we know for certain exists, the one we're experiencing right now together, in this shared moment of cosmic curiosity and quiet amazement at the sheer audacity of existence itself. And perhaps that's where the true magic of multiverse contemplation reveals itself, not in what it proves about reality, but in what it awakens within us. The capacity to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously, to find wonder in uncertainty, to embrace both our cosmic insignificance and our profound importance as conscious observers capable of pondering such vast possibilities. Let's drift now into one of the most elegant attempts to make sense of the multiverse: the mathematical frameworks that physicists have developed to give structure to these seemingly impossible ideas. Take eternal inflation theory, which suggests that our Big Bang wasn't a unique event, but rather one bubble of expansion in an eternally inflating cosmic foam. Imagine a pot of boiling water where bubbles constantly form and expand, each bubble representing a separate universe with its own physical laws and constants. In this model, inflation never truly stops. It continues forever. In some regions of a larger space, while occasionally creating pockets where inflation ends and normal spacetime begins. These pockets become universes like ours, complete with their own big bangs, their own evolution, their own potential for stars, planets, and perhaps consciousness. The mathematics of eternal inflation are surprisingly robust, emerging naturally from our best theories of cosmic evolution, and yet they lead us to conclusions that seem to stretch the very meaning of the word real. But mathematics has given us even more exotic possibilities. Consider the holographic principle, which suggests that all the information contained in a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary, much like how a hologram stores three-dimensional information on a two-dimensional surface. If this principle is correct, then our three-dimensional reality might actually be a kind of projection from information stored on a distant two-dimensional boundary. This leads to the startling possibility that what we experience as our universe might be one of many possible projections from the same underlying information structure, like different movies being projected from the same holographic film. Each projection would be equally real, equally valid, but completely different in its experienced content. There might be versions of reality where the same fundamental information gives rise to universes, with different dimensions, different physical laws, different stories entirely. String theory adds yet another layer of mathematical possibility by suggesting that the fundamental building blocks of reality are not point like particles, but tiny vibrating strings. These strings can vibrate in countless different ways, and each vibration pattern corresponds to different particles, different forces, different physical properties. The mathematics of string theory also requires extra dimensions beyond the three spatial dimensions we experience daily. These extra dimensions might be compactified, curled up in ways that are normally invisible to us. But the manner of compactification could vary from region to region, creating what physicists call the string landscape, a vast space of possible vacuum states, each corresponding to a different type of universe with different physical laws. The number of possible compactifications is staggering, estimated at 10 to the 500th power or more, each representing a potential reality with its own unique character. Some of these string theory universes might have four spatial dimensions instead of three, making them utterly alien to our experience. Others might have different numbers of fundamental forces or particles that behave in ways we can't imagine. There could be realities where gravity works differently, where electromagnetism has a different strength, where the very concept of matter takes on forms that would seem magical to us. The mathematics becomes even more intriguing when we consider how these different universes might relate to each other. In some models, they exist in parallel, unable to communicate or influence each other directly. But in others, there might be subtle connections, ways that information or influence could leak between realities. These connections might be so weak as to be practically undetectable, but they could theoretically allow for the kind of multiverse signatures that researchers are searching for in cosmic background radiation. Quantum field theory offers yet another pathway into multiverse thinking through the concept of vacuum fluctuations. Even empty space isn't truly empty, but seethes with virtual particles that pop into existence and annihilate in incredibly brief moments. These quantum fluctuations follow probability distributions, but in an infinite multiverse, Every possible configuration of these fluctuations would occur somewhere, leading to universes that differ in the most fundamental ways imaginable. Consider the implications. If quantum fluctuations can create any possible arrangement of matter and energy, then somewhere in the multiverse, there are universes that began with completely different initial conditions. Universes where the early cosmic soup contained different ingredients, where the first stars formed differently, where the entire history of cosmic evolution followed alternative pathways. There might even be universes where quantum fluctuations spontaneously created complex structures like planets or even living beings without the usual long process of cosmic evolution. The anthropic principle emerges naturally from these considerations, suggesting that we observe the particular set of physical constants and laws that we do not because they're uniquely special, but because they're the ones compatible with the existence of observers like us, in a multiverse containing every possible set of physical laws. We necessarily find ourselves in one of the rare universes where those laws permit the development of complexity, structure, and ultimately consciousness. This anthropic reasoning can feel unsatisfying, like explaining why a lottery winner won by pointing out that someone had to win, but it might actually reflect something profound about the nature of existence and observation. If consciousness is rare in the multiverse, then conscious beings will naturally find themselves in the tiny fraction of realities where consciousness can arise, regardless of how improbable such realities might be. The implications ripple through our understanding of scientific explanation itself. Traditionally, science seeks to explain why things are the way they are through fundamental principles and causal relationships. But in a multiverse context, some features of our reality might not have deeper explanations beyond the anthropic observation that we exist to observe them. This shifts the focus from asking why our universe has the properties it does to asking what kinds of universes are capable of supporting observers. But perhaps the most profound mathematical insight comes from considering the relationship between possibility and actuality. In our everyday experience, these seem clearly distinct. There are things that could happen and things that actually do happen. But in certain multiverse models, this distinction dissolves. Every possibility is actual somewhere. Every potential is realized in some branch of the cosmic tree. This suggests that mathematics itself might be more fundamental than physical reality, that what we call the physical world is simply one way that abstract mathematical relationships can be experienced. If this mathematical universe hypothesis is correct, then exploring mathematics becomes a form of cosmic archaeology, a way of discovering what kinds of realities are possible and perhaps even what kinds as actually exist somewhere in the infinite space of mathematical possibility. When mathematicians discover new theorems or explore abstract structures, they might be uncovering features of real universes that exist in distant corners of the multiverse. This perspective transforms our understanding of mathematical beauty and elegance. Perhaps certain mathematical structures feel beautiful to us, not because of cultural conditioning or evolutionary psychology, but because they reflect deep harmonies that run through all possible realities. Mathematical beauty becomes a kind of cosmic resonance, a recognition of patterns that transcend any single universe. The concept also suggests New ways of thinking about the relationship between mind and mathematics. If consciousness is fundamentally mathematical in nature, then the minds capable of discovering mathematical truths might be recognizing aspects of their own deep structure when we prove a theorem or solve an equation. We might be exploring the mathematical foundations of our own existence, the patterns that make conscious observation possible. Consider what this means for the nature of discovery and creativity. Every mathematical insight, every scientific breakthrough, every artistic inspiration might be a moment of connection with the deeper mathematical reality that underlies all possible worlds. Creativity becomes less about generating something from nothing and more about navigating through infinite possibility space, finding and expressing patterns that already exist in the abstract realm of mathematical truth. The implications extend to questions about the ultimate fate of consciousness itself. If consciousness is a mathematical pattern, then it might be preserved in the abstract mathematical structure of reality, even when its physical substrate disappears. The particular arrangement of information processing that constitutes your consciousness might exist eternally as a mathematical object, regardless of what happens to your biological brain. This doesn't necessarily mean personal immortality in any conventional sense, but rather suggests that the pattern of information and relationships that make you who you are has a kind of mathematical permanence, like how the number pi continues to exist, even if every computer calculating its digits were destroyed. The mathematical relationships that define pi remain real and accessible to any mind capable of understanding them. In this view, consciousness becomes less like a candle that can be snuffed out and more like a mathematical theorem that once discovered remains forever true. The particular way that you process information, integrate experiences, and respond to the world creates a unique pattern in the space of possible minds. And that pattern has a reality that transcends any particular physical implementation. These ideas push us toward a kind of cosmic democracy where every possible form of consciousness, every conceivable way of experiencing reality, gets equal ontological status. Somewhere in the multiverse, there are minds vastly more intelligent than ours, and others that are simpler. There are forms of consciousness so alien that we wouldn't recognize them as minds at all, and yet they would be equally real, equally valid ways of participating in the grand mathematical symphony of existence. As we explore these mathematical landscapes of possibility, we begin to see that the multiverse isn't just about parallel universes or alternate histories. It's about the fundamental nature of existence itself, the relationship between the possible and the actual, between mathematics and reality, between consciousness and the cosmos. It suggests that reality might be far more generous, more inclusive, more abundant than we ever dared imagine. The mathematical multiverse also offers a unique perspective on the problem of meaning and purpose. If every possible story gets told somewhere, then perhaps meaning comes not from uniqueness, but from participation, from the active engagement of consciousness with the infinite possibilities available to it. Your particular path through possibility space matters not because it's the only path, but because it's the path that you're actively creating and experiencing. This mathematical view of the multiverse transforms questions about existence from why is there something rather than nothing to why is there this particular something rather than some other something. And perhaps the answer is beautifully simple. There isn't just this particular something, there's every possible something, and we happen to be conscious participants in one small corner of an infinite mathematical reality that contains every conceivable form of existence. As these ideas settle into our minds like gentle snow, we find ourselves standing at the edge of human understanding, peering into depths that stretch far beyond what any single mind can fully grasp. And yet there's something deeply comforting about the mathematical multiverse. It suggests that reality is not arbitrary or cruel, but rather perfectly complete in its exploration of all possibilities, perfectly generous in its willingness to give existence to every conceivable form of being. The mathematics whispers to us that we are both infinitely small participants in an inconceivably vast reality and infinitely precious as the only conscious observers of our particular corner of mathematical truth. We are temporary patterns in an eternal symphony, brief melodies in an infinite composition, and that paradox of insignificance and importance might be the most beautiful truth of all. The mathematical multiverse might seem abstract and distant from our daily lives, but it connects to something profoundly intimate: the nature of choice and the weight we give to our decisions. Every morning, when you wake up and decide what to wear, how to spend your day, whom to call or avoid, you're navigating through a space of possibilities that in a multiverse context becomes literally infinite. Yet the choice you make remains uniquely yours, experienced through your particular consciousness in your specific reality. This creates a beautiful paradox that lies at the heart of multiverse contemplation. If every possible choice is made somewhere, then why do your choices matter? And yet they matter intensely, because they determine which story you experience, which path through infinite possibility becomes your lived reality. The multiverse doesn't diminish the importance of choice. It transforms choice from being about determining what happens to being, about determining what you experience. Imagine standing in a vast library that contains every possible book, every conceivable story, every potential narrative. The existence of all those books doesn't make your choice of which one to read meaningless. Instead, it makes that choice more precious, because while every story exists, you can only read one at a time. Your attention, your consciousness, your experience is what brings a particular story to life for you. This perspective on choice extends to how we think about regret and what if scenarios in a single universe model our unchosen paths, feel like lost opportunities, roads not taken that exist only in our imagination. But if the multiverse is real, then those unchosen paths are being walked by other versions of you, living out the alternatives, experiencing the outcomes you can only wonder about. There's a version of you who took that job. You turned down who moved to that city. You considered who said yes when you said no. This doesn't eliminate regret, but it transforms it. Instead of mourning lost possibilities, you might find peace, knowing that those possibilities aren't lost. They're being explored elsewhere by other facets of your existence. The path you didn't take isn't empty. It's filled with another version of your story, unfolding according to different choices, different circumstances, different moments of courage or hesitation. But the multiverse also raises profound questions about identity and continuity. what makes you you. If infinite versions of you exist with slightly different experiences, different memories, different personalities, are you all the same person experiencing different realities? Or are you distinct individuals who happen to share a common origin point? Philosophers call this the problem of personal identity across possible worlds, and it touches on some of the deepest mysteries of consciousness. One way to approach this puzzle is through the lens of psychological continuity. You are you because of the specific sequence of experiences that have shaped your consciousness, your memories, your personality. Your way of processing information and responding to the world other versions of you in parallel realities might be similar, but they're not identical because they've had different experiences, made different choices, been shaped by different circumstances. Think of it like a river that splits into multiple streams. Each stream carries water from the same source, but as they flow through different terrain, they develop their own character, their own patterns, their own unique journey toward whatever ocean awaits them. The streams share a common origin, but they become distinct waterways, each with its own story to tell. This view suggests that your consciousness, your sense of self, is intimately tied to the particular sequence of moments you've experienced, the specific pathway you've traced through possibility space. Other versions of you aren't experiencing your life, they're experiencing their own lives, which happen to spring from similar starting conditions, but diverge in countless subtle ways. The implications ripple through how we think about mortality and legacy. If consciousness is tied to specific sequences of experience, then your death doesn't eliminate you from the multiverse. It simply ends one particular thread in the infinite tapestry. But you processed information, loved people create the pattern. You created the way beauty or meaning. The pattern has a kind of permanence in the mathematical structure of reality. Moreover, if new versions of you are constantly being created through quantum branching, then in some sense, you're continuously being born as well as continuously dying. Each moment spawns new versions while ending others. Your consciousness rides one particular thread through this branching process, experiencing continuity and change in equal measure. This perspective on mortality can be both comforting and challenging. Comforting because it suggests that death isn't a complete ending, but rather a transition from experiencing one thread of possibility to whatever comes next. Challenging because it raises questions about what we mean by survival and continuation. If consciousness is constantly branching, are you the same person who went to sleep last night, or a new branch of consciousness that inherited yesterday's memories? The multiverse also offers unique insights into the nature of love and relationships when you love someone. You're loving a specific pattern of consciousness, a particular way of being in the world that has been shaped by countless choices, experiences, and moments in a multiverse context. That beloved person exists in infinite variations, each slightly different, but all recognizably them. This might make love feel less unique if infinite versions of your beloved exist. Then why is your particular relationship special, but perhaps the opposite is true? Your love isn't for the abstract concept of that person or for all their possible variations. Your love is for the specific version you've encountered. The particular way they laugh at your jokes, comfort you in difficult moments, share experiences that exist only in your shared reality. The relationship you have with someone is unique, not because they're unique in the multiverse, but because the specific combination of your two consciousness streams, your particular way of interacting, creating shared memories, and building a life together exists only in your branch of reality. Other versions of you might love other versions of them, but the love you share is irreplaceable and irreducible to any other combination. This extends to loss and grief. When someone you love dies in your reality, they continue to exist in countless other realities, living full lives, making new memories, experiencing joy and growth in ways you can barely imagine. This doesn't diminish the reality of your loss or make your grief less valid, but it does suggest that death might be less final than it appears from our limited perspective. The person you've lost isn't gone from the multiverse, they're simply no longer accessible to your particular thread of consciousness. It's like losing radio contact with a ship at sea. The ship continues its journey, but you can no longer hear its signals, no longer know where it's going or what it's experiencing. The silence doesn't mean the journey has ended. Some find this perspective on loss deeply comforting, while others find it troubling if our loved ones continue to exist elsewhere. Does that make our particular loss less significant? Or does it highlight the preciousness of the specific connections we forge in our accessible reality? Perhaps both are true simultaneously. We grieve the loss of access to particular versions of people while finding comfort in knowing that their existence continues in forms we cannot directly experience. The multiverse also transforms how we think about hope and possibility when facing difficult circumstances, illness, depression, loss, or failure. It's natural to feel trapped by circumstances, to believe that things cannot get better. But if the multiverse is real, then somewhere things are better. There are realities where the illness doesn't progress, where the depression lifts, where the loss doesn't occur, where the failure becomes success. This doesn't mean you should ignore problems in your current reality or wait for circumstances to improve elsewhere, but it does suggest that hope has a kind of cosmic backing, that possibility is never truly exhausted. Somewhere in the vast space of parallel realities, every conceivable improvement, every potential healing, every possible transformation is actually occurring. The challenge becomes learning to hold both truths simultaneously, acknowledging the difficulties of your current situation while maintaining awareness. That limitation might be less absolute than it appears. Your particular thread of reality might be experiencing hardship, but the larger tapestry of existence includes every possible form of flourishing. This perspective can inspire a unique form of compassion when you encounter someone who seems to be making terrible choices or living a destructive life. You might remember that somewhere else, versions of that person are making better choices, living more fulfilling lives, discovering their potential. The person before you isn't the sum total of all their possible selves. They're one expression of a consciousness that exists in infinite variations. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for boundaries and consequences, but it can soften judgment and increase empathy. The person struggling with addiction, the individual consumed by anger, the colleague who seems perpetually negative, all have versions elsewhere that are healthier, happier, more balanced. Your compassion can extend to both the difficult version you encounter and the better versions that exists beyond your direct experience. Children seem to grasp multiverse thinking almost intuitively. They play games where they're superheroes in one moment, ordinary kids the next. They tell stories where anything can happen, where the rules of reality bend to accommodate whatever narrative emerges. They live naturally in a space of infinite possibility without the adult need to pin everything down to single definite outcomes. Perhaps this childlike comfort with multiplicity offers a clue about how to live gracefully in a potential multiverse. We might cultivate what we could call possibility consciousness, a way of being that remains open to the vast space of what could be while fully engaging with what is. This doesn't mean becoming detached from current reality, but rather holding it lightly, remembering that it's one beautiful thread in an infinite weaving. Possibility consciousness might manifest as increased curiosity about alternative perspectives. After all, if infinite viewpoints exist somewhere, then the person who disagrees with you might be offering a glimpse into how things look from a different branch of reality. It might inspire greater creativity as you remember that every conceivable form of artistic expression exists somewhere waiting to be discovered or channeled. It might also cultivate a unique form of patience with the pace of change in your current reality. If you're working towards some goal, healing from trauma, or waiting for circumstances to improve, you might find comfort knowing that somewhere the goal has already been achieved, the healing has already occurred, the circumstances have already shifted. This doesn't make current struggles less real, but it can provide a sense that you're not alone in the work, that versions of you elsewhere are succeeding even when you feel like you're failing. The multiverse perspective might also influence how we approach learning and growth. If infinite knowledge exists somewhere distributed across countless realities, then every question you have has been answered somewhere. Every skill you want to develop has been mastered somewhere. Every problem you face has been solved somewhere. This doesn't mean the answers will automatically appear in your reality, but it suggests that learning becomes a process of alignment, a way of moving your consciousness closer to the versions of yourself that already possess what you seek. Meditation, spiritual practice, creative work, and deep study all become forms of interdimensional navigation, ways of shifting your consciousness toward the realities where wisdom, insight, and understanding flow more freely. You're not creating knowledge from nothing. You're discovering truths that already exist in the vast library of possibility. This perspective transforms failure from a dead end into a kind of course correction. If an approach doesn't work in your reality, that doesn't mean it's fundamentally flawed. It might work perfectly elsewhere for different versions of you, under different circumstances. Your job becomes less about finding the one right answer and more about finding the approaches that work for your particular thread of existence. The multiverse might also influence how we think about social and political change. If every possible society exists somewhere, then utopian visions aren't just idealistic dreams. They're actual realities being lived out by versions of humanity that made different choices, developed different institutions, found different solutions to the problems we're still struggling with. This doesn't make current injustices acceptable or eliminate the need for activism and reform, but it can provide inspiration and guidance, knowing that peaceful, prosperous, equitable societies exist. Somewhere might offer blueprints for the changes we want to create in our accessible reality. We're not trying to build something that's never been done. We're trying to align our reality with the better versions that already exist elsewhere. Environmental destruction, inequality, oppression, and conflict all have their opposites somewhere in the multiverse. Realities where humanity learned to live sustainably, where justice flourishes, where differences are celebrated rather than feared, where conflicts are resolved through understanding rather than violence. These aren't impossible dreams. They're actual achievements waiting to be discovered and implemented. Yet this same abundance can sometimes feel overwhelming if every possible good exists somewhere alongside every possible evil. Then how do we make sense of moral responsibility and ethical choice? Why work for justice in your reality? If injustice is being perpetrated elsewhere, why create beauty? If ugliness is also being created, why choose love? If hatred is being chosen somewhere else? Perhaps the answer lies in recognizing that consciousness is not passive, but participatory. Your choices don't just determine which reality you experience, they contribute to the overall character of the multiverse itself. Every act of kindness you perform, every moment of beauty you create, every stand you take for justice adds to the sum total of goodness in existence. Even if evil persists elsewhere, your contributions matter because they expand the regions of the multiverse where positive values flourish. Think of it like voting in an election where every possible candidate wins somewhere. Your vote doesn't determine the overall outcome across all realities, but it does determine which outcome your particular region experiences. And if consciousness is indeed fundamental to the structure of reality, then conscious choices might have more influence across the multiverse than we currently understand. The mathematical elegance of the multiverse suggests that reality might be structured in ways that amplify positive choices that consciousness naturally gravitates toward: beauty, truth, goodness, and meaning. Not because these are imposed from outside, but because they represent stable patterns that consciousness naturally creates when given infinite opportunity to explore and develop. In this view, your efforts to live ethically, to create beauty, to reduce suffering, and increase joy aren't just local improvements to your particular reality. They're contributions to the overall evolution of consciousness across all possible worlds. Your particular thread of awareness becomes a laboratory where consciousness experiments with new ways of being, and the successful experiments ripple outward, influencing the development of other realities. This perspective transforms individual existence from a brief isolated incident into participation in a cosmic project. The exploration of what consciousness can become when given infinite time space and opportunity to grow and develop your life becomes both utterly unique as the only experience you can directly access and profoundly connected as one note in an infinite symphony of awareness, exploring every possible way of being conscious. As we drift deeper into these contemplations, the multiverse begins to feel less like an abstract scientific hypothesis and more like a lived reality, a context within which every moment becomes both ordinary and miraculous. Ordinary, because it's one among infinite similar moments; miraculous, because it's the only moment you can directly experience and influence. The gentle paradox of multiverse existence invites us into a unique form of presence where we hold lightly to outcomes while engaging deeply with process, where we remain unattached to being the only version of ourselves while caring intensely about being the best version we can be in this particular reality, where we find peace in knowing that every story gets told somewhere while taking full responsibility for the story we're telling here and now. And perhaps that's the most beautiful invitation the multiverse offers, not to escape from this reality into fantasies about others, but to engage more fully with this one, knowing that it's both infinitely precious as the only reality we can directly access, and infinitely connected as one expression of consciousness, exploring the endless space of what it means to exist, to love, to create, and to wonder at the magnificent mystery of being itself. The elegance of these mathematical frameworks leads us to consider what might be the most profound question of all. What would it feel like to actually encounter evidence of another universe? Imagine for a moment that tomorrow astronomers announce they've found an unmistakable signature in the cosmic microwave background, a perfect circle of slightly different temperature that can only be explained by a collision with another bubble universe billions of years ago. How would such a discovery change the way you see your morning coffee, your relationships, your place in the grand scheme of things? The psychological impact of confirmed multiverse existence might be unlike anything humanity has experienced before. We've survived the revelation that Earth isn't the center of the solar system, that our solar system isn't the center of the galaxy, that our galaxy is one of billions. Each of these discoveries required a fundamental shift in how we see ourselves, from central to peripheral, from unique to common, from special to ordinary. But discovering that our entire universe is just one note in an infinite cosmic symphony would represent a shift of an entirely different magnitude. Some might find the revelation deeply liberating. All the weight we place on getting things exactly right, on being perfect, on avoiding mistakes, it might suddenly seem beautifully unnecessary. Somewhere else, you made different choices, had different experiences, explored different paths. The pressure to live the one perfect life could transform into the joy of living this particular life fully and authentically, knowing it's one authentic expression among infinite others. But for others, the psychological adjustment might prove more challenging. If infinite versions of every experience exist, does anything truly matter? Does uniqueness have any meaning? Some might struggle with what psychologists might call multiverse melancholy, a deep sadness that comes from realizing that nothing you do is truly unprecedented, that every triumph has been achieved elsewhere, that every tragedy has played out in countless variations across the cosmic stage. The social and cultural implications would ripple through every aspect of human civilization. Religions would need to grapple with what infinite realities mean for concepts of divine purpose, moral accountability, and spiritual meaning. Are there infinite versions of every deity, or does the divine somehow transcend the multiverse entirely? Do moral laws apply across all realities, or does each universe develop its own ethical framework? Art and literature would explode with new possibilities and new anxieties. Writers might wonder whether every story they could possibly tell has already been written somewhere else, while simultaneously being inspired by the knowledge that infinite stories remain to be discovered and expressed. Musicians might find themselves creating symphonies that feel like half remembered melodies from parallel worlds, while painters explore colors and forms that seem to channel visions from realities where physics works differently. The legal system would face unprecedented challenges. If consciousness branches with every quantum event, then when exactly does a person become responsible for their actions? If alternate versions of every criminal exist where they never committed their crimes, does that change how we think about justice and rehabilitation? These aren't merely academic questions, they would become practical concerns requiring new frameworks for thinking about identity, responsibility, and moral agency. Education would be revolutionized as we grapple with teaching children about their place in infinite reality. How do you help a young mind understand that they are both utterly unique and endlessly replicated? How do you instill values and ambition when every possible outcome is being lived out somewhere? Teachers might develop new pedagogies focused on helping students appreciate their particular thread of experience while remaining connected to the larger tapestry of existence. The very concept of death would undergo radical re examination. Grief counselors would need new approaches for helping people process loss when their loved ones continue to exist in countless other realities. Would funerals become celebrations of a particular configuration of consciousness, or would they evolve into something entirely different? Perhaps ceremonies acknowledging the transition of awareness from one accessible reality to others that lie beyond our direct experience. Mental health professionals would encounter entirely new categories of existential anxiety and depression. Some individuals might develop what we could call multiverse dysphoria, a persistent sense of being in the wrong reality, combined with the agonizing knowledge that the right reality exists somewhere but remains forever inaccessible. Others might experience multiverse addiction, becoming so obsessed with imagining alternate versions of their lives that they lose touch with the reality they actually inhabit. But alongside these challenges would come new forms of therapy and healing. Imagine a counseling approach that helps people process trauma by exploring the knowledge that versions of them exist where the trauma never occurred, where healing has already taken place, where strength and resilience have been fully developed. This wouldn't minimize current pain, but it might provide a unique form of hope, the certainty that recovery and growth are not just possible, but actual somewhere in the vast space of parallel existence. The field of consciousness studies would be completely transformed. Researchers would need to develop new methodologies for studying awareness that might branch and merge across realities. Meditation practices might evolve to help practitioners sense their connection to alternate versions of themselves, while psychologists explore whether certain mental states or spiritual experiences represent moments of contact between parallel consciousness streams. Technology development would take on cosmic significance. Every invention, every breakthrough, every technological advancement would be understood as one path among infinite others being explored simultaneously across the multiverse. This might inspire unprecedented innovation as engineers and scientists realize they're not just solving problems for one world, but potentially discovering solutions that resonate across multiple realities. The pharmaceutical industry would grapple with the realization that every possible drug combination, every conceivable treatment, Every potential cure exists somewhere in the multiverse. Medical research might shift from discovering new treatments to finding ways to align our reality with the versions where diseases have already been conquered, where aging has been reversed, where consciousness and body exist in perfect harmony. Space exploration would take on entirely new meaning. We wouldn't just be searching for life elsewhere in our universe, we'd be contemplating the possibility of encountering signs of alternate versions of ourselves, civilizations that developed from the same starting point, but made different choices, explored different technologies, evolved along different pathways. The SETI program might expand to search not just for alien intelligence, but for signals from parallel Earths where humanity took different evolutionary turns. Environmental movements would need to reconsider their strategies in light of infinite realities. Yes, there are universes where Earth's environment has been completely destroyed, but there are also infinite universes where perfect ecological balance has been achieved, where renewable energy powers thriving civilizations, where humanity learned to live in complete harmony with natural systems. The question becomes, how do we guide our particular reality toward alignment with the sustainable versions? The concept of progress itself would require redefinition. In a single universe, progress feels linear. We move from worse conditions to better ones, from ignorance to knowledge, from conflict to peace. But in a multiverse context, progress becomes multidimensional. Every possible trajectory is being explored simultaneously. So the question isn't whether humanity will progress, but which kind of progress our particular thread of reality will experience. Economic systems would face fundamental challenges. If every possible economic outcome exists somewhere, what gives money its meaning? What drives ambition and innovation when every conceivable level of wealth and poverty is being experienced by different versions of humanity? New economic theories might emerge based on the idea of optimizing not just for material prosperity, but for the quality of conscious experience across multiple reality streams. The entertainment industry would undergo radical transformation. Imagine virtual reality experiences that claim to offer glimpses into alternate versions of your life, or movies that explore not just fictional stories, but documentaries about what actually happened in parallel realities. The line between entertainment and documentary, between fiction and fact, would blur as we grapple with the possibility that every imaginable story is actually occurring somewhere in the multiverse. Dating and relationships would take on cosmic complexity. When you meet someone and feel that instant connection, that sense of recognition, would you wonder if you're encountering a version of someone you've loved in countless other realities? Would relationship counselors help couples work through not just their current problems, but their awareness that infinite versions of their relationship exist, some thriving, others failing, all equally real? Parenting would require entirely new approaches. How do you raise children who understand that they are both utterly unique and endlessly replicated? How do you help them develop resilience when they know that versions of them exist where every possible tragedy and triumph is unfolding? Parents might learn to focus less on protecting their children from all possible harm and more on helping them develop the wisdom to navigate their particular path through infinite possibility with grace and purpose. The publishing industry would grapple with questions of originality and creativity. If every possible book exists somewhere in the multiverse, what does it mean to be an author? Perhaps writing becomes less about creating something from nothing and more about serving as a conduit for stories that already exist in other realities, helping them find expression in our particular world. Readers might approach books not as fictional creations, but as windows into actual experiences happening elsewhere in the cosmic library. Sports and competition would require philosophical re examination. If every possible outcome of every game exists somewhere, what gives victory its meaning? Perhaps the focus would shift from winning to the quality of effort, the beauty of performance, the joy of participation. Athletes might train not just to defeat opponents in their reality, but to explore the highest possibilities of human physical and mental achievement, knowing that somewhere those possibilities have already been fully realized. The concept of expertise would be revolutionized. In our current reality, we respect experts because they know things that others don't. But in a multiverse context, every possible level of knowledge exists somewhere. This might lead to new forms of humility as experts realize that their knowledge, while valuable in their reality, represents just one point in an infinite space of possible understanding. Or it might inspire unprecedented confidence as people realize that the highest levels of expertise in any field are actually being achieved somewhere and can therefore be aspired to and potentially accessed. Travel and exploration would take on metaphysical dimensions. Visiting new places wouldn't just be about experiencing different geographies and cultures, but about encountering versions of reality that developed differently. Every destination might feel like a glimpse into alternate histories, alternate possibilities for how human civilization might have unfolded under different circumstances. The very notion of privacy would require reconsideration. If infinite versions of every private moment exist somewhere, does privacy have any meaning? Or does it become more precious? Because while infinite versions of you exist, the particular sequence life belongs uniquely to your thread of consciousness, of private thoughts and experiences that constitute your inner. Sleep and dreaming would be understood in entirely new ways. Perhaps dreams aren't random neural firing, but brief moments of contact with parallel versions of yourself, glimpses into the experiences of consciousness streams that branched off from yours at various quantum decision points. Sleep researchers might develop new techniques for enhancing these interdimensional contacts, helping people learn from the experiences of their alternate selves. The concept of wisdom would expand beyond knowledge, accumulated in one lifetime, to encompass awareness that stretches across multiple realities. Wise individuals might be those who have learned to sense their connection to the broader multiverse, who can draw insights not just from their own experiences, but from intuitive awareness of how similar situations have played out across infinite variations. Museums and historical preservation would take on cosmic significance. Every artifact, every historical record, every piece of cultural heritage would be understood as documenting not just what happened in our reality, but one pathway among infinite others that human civilization explored. Historians might develop new methodologies for studying not just what occurred, but what could have occurred, not just the choices that were made, but the infinite alternatives that were simultaneously being explored elsewhere. The field of psychology would need to expand its understanding of mental health to encompass multiverse awareness. Some individuals might develop extraordinary sensitivity to their alternate selves, experiencing what we might call interdimensional empathy, a deep, felt sense of connection to the experiences of their parallel versions. Others might struggle with multiverse overwhelm, finding it difficult to focus on their particular reality when aware of infinite alternatives unfolding simultaneously. And through all these transformations, through all these challenges and opportunities, consciousness itself would continue its ancient dance of awareness and wonder. We would remain, as we have always been, temporary patterns of awareness, temporarily embodied in temporary forms, experiencing temporary moments of connection, that fundamental condition. It would simply reveal it to beauty and understanding. The multiverse wouldn't change be far more abundant, far more generous, far more magnificent than we ever. The greatest gift of multiverse thinking isn't the Dard imagine. In the end, perhaps possibility that other realities exist, but the way contemplating that possibility enriches our relationship with the reality we know for certain. This one, right here, right now, where you're listening to these words and allowing them to paint new landscapes of possibility in the quiet theater of your mind. Imagine waking tomorrow to news that changes everything. Astronomers announce they've detected what can only be described as an echo from beyond our cosmic bubble, a signal so subtle yet unmistakable that it can only mean one thing. We are not alone in the vast ocean of existence. The discovery would ripple through human consciousness like a stone dropped into still water, transforming not just our understanding of reality, but the very way we experience being alive. Such a revelation would mark the beginning of what we might call the post-unique era of human existence. Suddenly, every assumption we've held about our special place in creation would require gentle but fundamental revision. We've weathered cosmic humbling before learning that Earth isn't the center of the solar system, that our sun is just one star among billions, that our galaxy is merely one island in an archipelago of countless others, but discovering that our entire universe is just one bubble in an infinite foam would represent a shift of unprecedented magnitude. The psychological landscape of humanity would transform in ways both beautiful and challenging. Some might experience what we could call multiverse liberation, a profound sense of relief that the immense pressure to get everything perfectly right in this one reality suddenly seems unnecessary. There would be comfort in knowing that somewhere else you made that phone call you've been putting off, took that risk you've been avoiding, said the words of living this you've been holding back the weight. One perfect life might dissolve into the joy of living this particular life with authenticity and grace. Yet alongside this liberation, others might struggle with what psychologists might term existential displacement, a deep, unsettling sense that if infinite versions of every moment exist, then perhaps nothing truly matters. The uniqueness that gives weight to our choices, our relationships, our achievements, might seem to evaporate, leaving behind a kind of cosmic loneliness, even surrounded by infinite versions of ourselves. Children would likely adapt with their characteristic resilience, already comfortable with imaginative play where they can be anyone, do anything, experience any adventure. The multiverse might feel like a natural extension of their existing relationship with possibility, but adults having spent decades building identities around being singular, unique individuals might find the adjustment more challenging, requiring new frameworks for understanding what it means to be both one among infinite and irreplaceably yourself. The very fabric of society would need reweaving as institutions grapple with infinite reality. Legal systems would face unprecedented questions about identity and responsibility. If consciousness branches with every quantum event, at what point does a person become accountable for their actions? How do we think about justice when alternate versions of every criminal exist, where they never committed their crimes? These wouldn't remain theoretical puzzles, but practical challenges requiring entirely new approaches to law and ethics. Education would undergo revolutionary transformation as teachers develop curricula for helping young minds navigate infinite existence. How do you instill ambition when every possible achievement is being accomplished somewhere else? How do you teach values when every conceivable moral framework is being explored across parallel realities? Educators might focus less on specific knowledge and more on developing what we could call multiverse wisdom, the ability to engage fully with your particular thread of experience while remaining connected to the larger tapestry. Religious and spiritual communities would face profound theological challenges if infinite realities exist. What does that mean for concepts of divine purpose, moral absolute spiritual destiny? Some might find their faith deepened by the possibility that the sacred encompasses not just our universe, but all possible universes. Others might struggle to understand how traditional teachings apply when every conceivable spiritual path is being walked simultaneously somewhere in the cosmic expanse. The arts would explode with new possibilities and new anxieties. Writers might wonder whether every story they could tell has already been written somewhere, while simultaneously being inspired by the knowledge that infinite narratives await discovery. Musicians might find themselves channeling melodies that feel like half remembered songs from parallel worlds, while visual artists explore forms and colors that seem to arrive from realities where physics works differently. Healthcare would be revolutionized as medical professionals grapple with the implications of infinite biological possibility. Every disease that exists in our reality has been cured somewhere else. Every limitation of the human body has been transcended in some parallel world. This knowledge might inspire unprecedented innovation as researchers realize they're not discovering new treatments so much as finding ways to align our reality with the versions where perfect health has already been achieved. The concept of death itself would require complete reconsideration if consciousness continues in other realities. Then what we call death might be better understood as a kind of transition, a movement from experiencing one thread of existence to whatever lies beyond our direct perception. Grief would remain real and important, but it might be accompanied by a deep knowing that the person you've lost continues their journey in forms and places you can no longer access. Mental health professionals would encounter entirely new forms of existential experience. Some individuals might develop acute sensitivity to their alternate selves, experiencing what we could call interdimensional awareness, a felt sense of connection to parallel versions of their consciousness. Others might struggle with reality displacement, finding it difficult to engage with their actual life when overwhelmed by awareness of infinite alternatives. But alongside these challenges would emerge new forms of healing and growth. Therapists might develop approaches that help people process difficulties by exploring the knowledge that versions of them exist, where healing has occurred, where trauma has been integrated, where strength has been fully developed. This wouldn't minimize current struggles, but could provide a unique form of hope. The certainty that recovery isn't just possible, but actual somewhere in the vast space of parallel existence. Technology development would take on cosmic significance as innovators realize they're not just solving problems for one world, but potentially discovering solutions that resonate across multiple realities. Every breakthrough, every invention, every creative leap would be understood as one pathway among infinite others being explored simultaneously. This perspective might inspire unprecedented collaboration as researchers understand they're participating in a multiversal project of consciousness, exploring its own potential. Environmental movements would need new strategies for a reality where every possible ecological outcome exists simultaneously. Yes, there are universes where Earth's biosphere has collapsed, but there are also infinite worlds where perfect environmental balance has been achieved, where renewable energy powers thriving civilizations, where humanity learned to live in complete harmony with natural systems. The question becomes how to guide our particular reality toward alignment with the sustainable versions. Economics would face fundamental revision if every possible financial outcome exists somewhere. What gives currency its meaning? What drives innovation? When every level of prosperity and poverty is being experienced by different versions of humanity, new economic theories might emerge focused less on accumulating resources and more on optimizing the quality of conscious experience across reality streams. The entertainment industry would blur the line between fiction and documentation. Imagine films that claim to show not imagined stories, but actual events from parallel realities, virtual experiences that offer glimpses into alternate versions of your own life, interactive narratives that help you explore the choices your other selves made. The very concept of fiction might evolve as we grapple with the possibility that every imaginable story is actually unfolding somewhere. Relationships would take on new dimensions of complexity when you meet someone and feel instant recognition, that deep sense of connection. Might you wonder if you're encountering a person you've loved across multiple realities? Couples might work through not just their current challenges, but their awareness that infinite versions of their relationship exist, some thriving, others struggling, all equally real, all equally meaningful. Parenting would require entirely new approaches. How do you raise children who understand they are both utterly unique and endlessly replicated? How do you help them develop resilience when they know versions of them exist? Where every possible outcome is unfolding, parents might focus less on protecting children from all harm and more on helping them navigate their particular path through infinite possibility. With wisdom, courage, and grace, travel would become a form of multidimensional exploration as people visit places not just to experience different geographies, but to encounter alternate versions of how human civilization might have developed. Every destination might feel like a window into parallel histories, different choices, different possibilities for how culture and society could have evolved. The very notion of expertise would be transformed if infinite knowledge exists distributed across countless realities. Then every question has been answered somewhere, every skill mastered, every problem solved. This might inspire new humility as experts realize their knowledge represents just one point in infinite understanding or unprecedented confidence, as people recognize that the highest levels of achievement in any field are actually being realized somewhere and can therefore be aspired to. Sleep and dreams would be understood through entirely new lenses. Perhaps our nighttime journeys aren't random neural activity, but brief moments of contact with parallel versions of ourselves, glimpses into experiences of consciousness, streams that branched from ours at various decision points. Sleep researchers might develop techniques for enhancing these interdimensional connections, helping people learn from the accumulated wisdom of their alternate selves. Museums and historical preservation would take on cosmic significance. Every artifact, every record, every piece of cultural heritage would document not just what happened in our timeline, but one pathway among infinite others that consciousness explored. Historians might study not just what occurred, but the infinite alternatives that were simultaneously being lived out across the multiverse. Privacy would require philosophical reconsideration if infinite versions of every private moment exist. Does privacy have meaning, or does it become more precious? Because while endless versions of you exist, the particular sequence of inner thoughts and experiences that constitute your consciousness belongs uniquely to your thread of reality. Wisdom would expand beyond knowledge, accumulated in one lifetime, to encompass awareness that stretches across multiple realities. Wise individuals might be those who sense their connection to the broader multiverse, who draw insights not just from personal experience, but from intuitive awareness of how similar situations have unfolded across infinite variations. The field of consciousness studies would be completely revolutionized as researchers develop methodologies for studying awareness that might branch and merge across realities. Meditation practices might evolve to help practitioners sense their connection to alternate versions of themselves, while neuroscientists explore whether certain mental states represent moments of interdimensional contact. Through all these transformations, through every challenge and opportunity, consciousness would continue its ancient dance of awareness and wonder. We would remain as we have always been, temporary patterns of awareness, temporarily embodied in temporary forms, experiencing temporary moments of beauty, connection, and understanding. The multiverse wouldn't change that fundamental condition. It would simply reveal it to be far more abundant, far more generous, far more magnificent than we ever dared imagine. Yet perhaps the most profound transformation would be internal, a shift in how we hold our own existence. Instead of clinging desperately to being the one true version of ourselves, we might learn to cherish being this particular version among infinite others. Instead of demanding that our reality be perfect, we might find peace, knowing that perfection exists somewhere while embracing the imperfect beauty of our accessible world. This perspective might cultivate what we could call quantum compassion, recognizing that everyone you encounter is also one expression among infinite others, that the person who frustrates you has versions elsewhere that are kinder, wiser, more patient that the individual struggling with addiction has parallel selves that found recovery, that even the most difficult people in your life have alternate versions that discovered peace, love, and understanding. The multiverse might teach us a new form of patience with change. If you're working toward healing, pursuing a dream, or waiting for circumstances to improve, there's profound comfort in knowing that somewhere the healing has occurred, the dream has been realized, the circumstances have already shifted. This doesn't make current struggles less real, but provides a sense that you're not alone in the work, that versions of you elsewhere are succeeding even when you feel like you're failing. Perhaps most beautifully, the multiverse perspective might inspire a unique form of presence where we hold outcomes lightly while engaging process deeply, where we remain unattached to being the only version of ourselves while caring intensely about being the best version we can be in this reality, where we find peace in knowing every story gets told somewhere while taking full responsibility for the story we're telling here and now. And in quiet moments, when the vastness feels overwhelming, when the infinite abundance seems too much to comprehend, we might remember that consciousness itself is the constant, the thread that weaves through every possibility, the awareness that makes experience possible, whether in this universe or countless others, whether in this moment or across all time, whether in this particular configuration of matter and energy or in forms so alien we cannot imagine them. Consciousness exploring itself through infinite expressions, each unique, each precious, each a temporary window through which the universe comes to know its own magnificent nature. And perhaps that's the deepest invitation of multiverse thinking, not to escape from this reality into fantasies of others, but to recognize this moment, this breath, this gentle awareness that allows you to contemplate such cosmic possibilities as a participation in something so vast, so beautiful, so generous that it contains room for every conceivable form of existence, including yours. The beauty of this perspective lies not in its certainty, but in its capacity to transform how we engage with uncertainty itself. When faced with difficult decisions, we might remember that every choice creates a branching point where all possibilities unfold. This doesn't make our decisions less important, but rather shifts the weight from needing to choose perfectly to choosing authentically from our particular vantage point in the cosmic web. Imagine approaching your morning routine with multiverse awareness as you select what to wear. You might smile, knowing that somewhere else you chose differently, and both choices are equally valid. As you decide whether to call an old friend, you might feel the gentle presence of parallel conversations already happening in alternate realities. This doesn't diminish the importance of your actual choice, but places it within a context of infinite possibility, where every decision is both crucial and held lightly. The workplace would be transformed by this new understanding of existence. Collaborative projects might benefit from team members who recognize that every possible solution is being explored somewhere, encouraging both bold creativity and patient persistence when facing seemingly impossible challenges. Knowing that breakthrough versions exist elsewhere might inspire the kind of innovative thinking that bridges the gap between current limitations and potential solutions. Conflict resolution would evolve as mediators help disputants remember that versions of them exist, where understanding has been reached, where common ground has been found, where seemingly irreconcilable differences have been harmoniously resolved. This perspective doesn't invalidate current disagreements, but provides a framework for believing that resolution is not just possible, but actual somewhere in the vast space of parallel negotiations. The aging process might be experienced with greater grace, as people remember that versions of them exist at every possible age, in various states of health, vitality, and wisdom. This doesn't eliminate the reality of physical decline or the natural grief that accompanies loss of capability, but it places these experiences within a larger context where every possible relationship with aging is being lived out simultaneously. Retirement and elder care would be revolutionized as society develops new appreciation for the accumulated wisdom that comes from conscious participation in one thread of infinite existence. Older individuals might be valued not just for their knowledge and experience, but for their unique perspective on what it means to walk one particular path through the endless garden of possibility. The concept of legacy would expand beyond what we leave behind in our single reality to encompass the contributions our consciousness makes to the overall evolution of awareness across all possible worlds. Every act of kindness, every moment of beauty created, every stand taken for justice adds to the sum total of goodness in existence, even as parallel versions explore different approaches to these same values. Addiction recovery programs might incorporate multiverse perspectives to help individuals understand that versions of them exist where healing has occurred, where healthy relationships with substances and behaviors have been developed, where the underlying pain that drives addictive patterns has been addressed and resolved. This wouldn't replace traditional recovery methods, but could provide additional hope and motivation for the difficult work of change. Creative endeavors would be understood as forms of interdimensional archaeology, where artists, writers, musicians, and makers serve as conduits for expressions that already exist in other realities. Their role becomes less about generating something from nothing and more about discovering and channeling possibilities that are waiting to be manifested in our particular world. The practice of gratitude might deepen as people recognize that their ability to experience beauty, love, connection, and wonder is both one expression among infinite others and absolutely precious as the only direct access they have to conscious experience. Appreciation becomes not just for what exists, but for the miracle of being the particular awareness that can recognize and cherish what exists. Scientific research would be infused with cosmic patience as investigators remember that every possible discovery is being made somewhere. The urgency of breakthrough becomes balanced with trust in the process, knowing that versions of research teams elsewhere have already solved the puzzles that current teams are working on. This perspective might reduce competitive pressure while increasing collaborative spirit. Mental health treatment might incorporate practices that help individuals sense their connection to healthier versions of themselves, not as escape from current reality, but as a resource for healing. Visualization techniques might evolve to help people access the strength, resilience, and wisdom that their parallel selves have developed, offering internal support for the work of growth and recovery. The justice system might develop restorative approaches that recognize both the reality of harm caused and the potential for transformation that exists within every individual, knowing that versions of offenders exist where different choices were made, where healing occurred, where contribution to community replaced destructive patterns. This perspective wouldn't eliminate accountability, but might emphasize rehabilitation and redemption. Urban planning and architecture might be influenced by awareness that every possible way of organizing human habitation is being explored somewhere. Designers might draw inspiration from the knowledge that ideal cities exist in parallel realities where transportation flows smoothly, where green spaces and built environments exist in perfect harmony, where all residents have access to beauty, safety, and community. The food industry might be transformed by recognition that every possible relationship between consciousness and nourishment exists somewhere. This might inspire more mindful approaches to agriculture, food, preparation, and dining, as people sense their connection to realities where perfect nutritional wisdom has been achieved, where eating is understood as communion between awareness and the living world. Transportation systems might evolve with appreciation for the countless ways consciousness moves through space in different realities. Perhaps this awareness would inspire more elegant solutions to mobility challenges, more beautiful integration of movement systems with natural environments, more joyful approaches to the simple act of getting from one place to another. Communication technologies might develop with recognition that every possible form of connection between conscious beings is being explored across the multiverse. This could inspire innovations that enhance empathy, understanding, and authentic expression while remaining grounded in the particular ways that consciousness manifests in our accessible reality. The fashion industry might be revolutionized by awareness that every possible form of self expression through appearance exists somewhere. This could lead to more inclusive, diverse, and creative approaches to clothing and adornment. As designers recognize, they're not inventing new possibilities, but discovering and manifesting expressions that already exist in parallel worlds. Gardening and agriculture might be approached with deeper reverence as cultivators recognize their participation in the endless exploration of relationships between consciousness and the growing world. Every seed planted, every harvest gathered becomes part of the cosmic experiment in how awareness can nurture and be nurtured by the living systems of which it is part. The practice of reading might be transformed as people recognize that every possible story, every conceivable narrative, every potential insight into the nature of existence is available somewhere in the infinite library of the multiverse. Each book becomes not just information or entertainment, but a window into actual experiences being lived out in parallel realities. Exercise and physical fitness might be approached with recognition that every possible relationship between consciousness and embodiment exists somewhere. This could inspire more joyful, exploratory approaches to movement as people sense their connection to versions of themselves that have achieved perfect harmony between mind and body. Cooking might become a form of interdimensional artistry, as chefs recognize that every possible combination of flavors, textures, and nourishment exists somewhere. Their work becomes less about invention and more about discovery, channeling culinary possibilities that are waiting to be manifested in our particular reality. Sleep patterns might be understood through the lens of consciousness, exploring different rhythms of rest and activity across infinite realities. This could lead to more personalized, flexible approaches to sleep as people recognize that their natural rhythms are one valid expression among countless others, rather than deviation from a single ideal home design might be influenced by awareness that every possible way of creating sanctuary exists somewhere. Interior designers might draw inspiration from the knowledge that perfect living spaces exist in parallel realities, while helping clients create environments that support their particular path through infinite possibility. The practice of listening might deepen as people recognize that every possible conversation, every conceivable exchange of understanding, every potential moment of authentic connection is happening somewhere. This awareness might inspire more present, engaged, compassionate listening as people appreciate the preciousness of the particular communications they're able to access. Weather patterns might be experienced with greater appreciation as people remember that every possible climate, every conceivable atmospheric condition, every potential relationship between consciousness and the elements exists somewhere. Storms become one expression among infinite others of the dynamic dance between awareness and environment. The simple act of breathing might be infused with cosmic awareness as people recognize their participation in the endless exploration of how consciousness interfaces with the physical world. Each breath becomes both utterly ordinary and profoundly miraculous ordinary because it's happening countless times across infinite realities. Miraculous because it's the only breath you can directly experience. Walking might become a form of meditation as people sense their movement through space, as participation in the infinite ways that consciousness explores its relationship with place and journey. Each step becomes both one among countless others and absolutely unique as part of your particular path through the landscape of possibility. The experience of silence might deepen as people recognize that every possible relationship between awareness and stillness exists somewhere. Quiet moments become windows into the vast peace that underlies all the activity and noise of existence, offering connection to the profound rest that consciousness finds when it stops trying to be anything other than what it is. And in the gentlest moments, when the mind grows quiet and the heart opens to wonder, we might sense something that transcends even the infinite abundance of the multiverse. The simple, profound fact of awareness itself, the consciousness that makes experience possible, whether singular or infinite, whether bounded or limitless, whether temporary or eternal, the very capacity to know, to feel, to wonder, that transforms mere existence into the lived miracle of being awake in whatever reality we find ourselves inhabiting. This awareness doesn't need the multiverse to be meaningful, but the multiverse, if it exists, offers a magnificent context within which to appreciate the precious, temporary, impossible, beautiful fact that consciousness arose somewhere in the cosmic dance and learned to contemplate its own nature, learned to love, learned to create, learned to wonder at the mystery of its own existence, and perhaps most remarkably learned to share that wonder with other points of awareness in whatever brief, beautiful moments of connection become possible across the vast spaces between minds. And so we find ourselves approaching what might be the most intimate question of all. What would it actually feel like to live consciously in a multiverse where every breath you take, every word you speak, every gentle thought that crosses your mind is simultaneously being experienced by countless variations of yourself across infinite realities? Would you feel more connected to existence or somehow more alone? Would the knowledge that every possible version of this moment is unfolding somewhere make this particular moment feel more precious or less significant? Perhaps the answer lies in recognizing that consciousness itself remains the constant thread weaving through every possibility. The awareness reading these words right now, experiencing whatever emotions they evoke, contemplating the vast strangeness of existence, is the same fundamental capacity for experience that would exist in any reality. Whether this universe stands alone or dances with infinite others, your ability to wonder, to feel beauty, to love and be loved represents something so basic, so essential, that it transcends even the question of how many realities might contain it. There is something deeply moving about the way consciousness seems to naturally create meaning, regardless of the scale on which it operates. A parent loving their child doesn't love them less upon learning that the observable universe contains 2 trillion galaxies. The same love wouldn't diminish upon discovering that infinite versions of that relationship exist across parallel realities. If anything, the knowledge that love itself is so fundamental, so persistent, that it appears in every conceivable configuration of existence might make each particular expression of love feel more rather than less miraculous. This suggests that meaning might not come from uniqueness, but from depth, from the quality of attention and care we bring to our actual experiences. Whether you're the only version of yourself or one among infinite others, the consciousness that allows you to appreciate a sunset, to feel gratitude for friendship, to find wonder in the complexity of existence, remains equally precious, equally capable of transforming mere physical processes into lived experience. The multiverse might teach us a beautiful paradox about significance in a reality where everything possible exists somewhere. Nothing is unique, but everything is irreplaceable. Your particular configuration of experiences, memories, relationships, and insights belongs only to your thread of consciousness, even if similar threads exist elsewhere. None of them carries exactly your perspective, your way of weaving meaning from the raw materials of existence. Imagine consciousness as a vast ocean temporarily forming itself into countless waves. Each wave is made of the same fundamental substance, yet each has its own shape, its own movement, its own brief dance with light and shadow. When a wave subsides, it doesn't disappear. It returns to the ocean that was always its deeper nature. Perhaps individual consciousness works similarly, temporary expressions of something vast and eternal, each precious for its particular form, while never separate from the infinite awareness that gives rise to all possible experience. This perspective might offer comfort to those who struggle with existential anxiety about death and impermanence. If consciousness is indeed fundamental to reality, then what we call death might be less like extinguishing a candle and more like a wave returning to the ocean. The particular pattern that constituted your individual awareness might dissolve, but the capacity for awareness itself continues eternal and inexhaustible, ready to form new patterns, new expressions, new temporary windows through which existence contemplates itself. But we need not wait for death to glimpse this deeper nature. Meditation, spiritual practice moments of profound beauty or connection, often provide tastes of what consciousness feels like when it stops identifying completely with any particular form, when the boundaries between self and other, between observer and observed, become transparent, revealing the seamless wholeness that was always present beneath the apparent separation. In such moments, the multiverse question becomes almost irrelevant whether infinite realities exist or not. The consciousness experiencing this moment of unity, this recognition of fundamental interconnectedness, touches something so basic, so undeniable, that it provides its own complete satisfaction. The wave recognizes its oceanic nature and suddenly questions about how many other waves might exist becomes secondary to the wonder of being wave and ocean simultaneously. Children seem to access this perspective, naturally moving fluidly between being completely absorbed in imaginary worlds and fully present to immediate reality. They don't struggle with questions about whether their pretend adventures are real. In some metaphysical sense, they simply inhabit whatever reality captures their attention, bringing the same quality of engagement to playing house as to eating dinner. Perhaps this childlike fluidity offers a model for living gracefully with cosmic uncertainty. We might cultivate what could be called quantum presence, a way of being that remains fully engaged with immediate experience while holding lightly to any particular outcome or explanation, a consciousness that can appreciate both the profound mystery of existence and the simple pleasure of warm tea on a cold evening, that can contemplate infinite realities while remaining grateful for this one accessible moment. This quality of presence doesn't require belief in the multiverse, but it's enriched by considering the possibility. Like a good poem that works on multiple levels, the multiverse concept offers layers of meaning that can deepen our relationship with existence. Whether or not it corresponds to literal truth, its contemplation expands our sense of what might be possible, both cosmically and personally. Perhaps the most practical gift of multiverse thinking is the way it can soften our relationship with failure and regret. When something doesn't work out as hoped, when relationships end, when dreams seem to crumble, when health fails, or circumstances become difficult, there's profound comfort in remembering that somewhere else things unfolded differently, that other versions of the story are playing out, where healing occurred, where love endured, where dreams came true in unexpected ways. This doesn't minimize real loss or eliminate the importance of grieving, but it can provide a gentle background of hope, a sense that the universe is more generous with possibilities than our immediate experience might suggest. It's like knowing that even when your local weather is stormy, somewhere else the sun is shining, the storm will pass, and clear skies exist, not just in the future, but right now in other locations. The multiverse might also inspire a unique form of patience with personal growth and change. If versions of you exist where healing has occurred, where wisdom has been developed, where peace has been found, then perhaps growth becomes less about achieving something entirely new and more about aligning with possibilities that already exist. Somewhere in the vast space of potential consciousness, meditation practices might evolve to include gentle awareness of this vast context, not as escape from present reality, but as recognition of the infinite creativity and possibility that consciousness represents. When you sit quietly and watch thoughts arise and pass away, You might sense your connection not just to this moment, but to the endless capacity for awareness that makes all moments possible. Prayer too might take on new dimensions, becoming less about requesting specific outcomes and more about expressing gratitude for the sheer abundance of existence, for consciousness itself, for the opportunity to participate, however briefly, in the cosmic exploration of what it means to be aware, to love, to wonder at the mystery of being. The arts would flourish with new inspiration as creators recognize their role not as originators, but as discoverers of beauty that exists eternally in the realm of possibility. Every painting waiting to be painted, every song longing to be heard, every story seeking expression through whatever consciousness becomes available to channel it into manifest reality. Science would continue its patient work of discovery with renewed wonder, knowing that every question has an answer somewhere, every mystery has a solution waiting to be uncovered, every limitation has been transcended in some corner of the infinite landscape. Researchers might approach their work with both rigorous methodology and cosmic humility, recognizing their participation in consciousness coming to understand itself. Love relationships would be held in a context of infinite tenderness. When you love someone, you're loving not just their particular configuration in this reality, but their essential nature that appears in countless variations across possible worlds. This doesn't make your specific relationship less special, but rather connects vast it to something and eternal, the capacity for consciousness to recognize and cherish itself in seemingly separate forms. Even difficult relationships might be approached with greater compassion when someone frustrates or hurts you. It becomes possible to hold awareness that versions of them exist where kindness prevails, where understanding has developed, where the pain driving their difficult behavior has been healed. This doesn't excuse harmful actions, but it can soften judgment and increase empathy. The simple activities of daily life might be infused with quiet reverence. Washing dishes becomes participation in the infinite ways consciousness cares for the forms through which it expresses itself. Preparing meals becomes offering nourishment to awareness temporarily embodied in physical form. Walking becomes movement through space that consciousness has created as a playground for exploring relationship between observer and environment. Sleep might be understood as consciousness temporarily withdrawing from individual focus to rest in its deeper universal nature. Dreams become not random neural firing, but glimpses into the vast creativity that awareness expresses when freed from the constraints of single point perspective. Waking becomes consciousness, choosing once again to manifest through particular form while retaining subtle connection to its infinite nature. Aging becomes a graceful dance between individual expression and return to source each stage of life, offering unique opportunities for consciousness to explore different relationships with embodiment, different capacities for wisdom, different ways of engaging with the temporary and eternal aspects of existence. The approach of death might be met with curiosity rather than terror. What will it feel like for this particular wave of consciousness to return to the ocean from which it never truly separated? What adventures await awareness when it's no longer focused through this specific nervous system, this particular history, this individual perspective? But perhaps most importantly, the multiverse reminds us that this moment right now, as you contemplate these ideas, as your consciousness engages with possibilities that stretch beyond immediate experience. This very moment represents something so improbable, so precious, so unlikely that its existence borders on the miraculous, whether it's one moment among infinite others or the only moment of its kind. The atoms in your body were forged in stellar furnaces billions of years ago. The elements that allow your neurons to fire were created in cosmic events of unimaginable violence and beauty. The evolutionary process that led to consciousness capable of contemplating its own nature required countless precise conditions maintained over vast spans of time for this moment of awareness to arise. And now here you are, temporary arrangement of matter and energy that has somehow become capable of love, wonder, curiosity about the deepest mysteries of existence, whether the multiverse exists or not, whether consciousness continues beyond physical death, whether meaning is inherent in reality or created by observers. None of these questions diminish the profound fact that awareness arose somewhere in the cosmic dance and learned to ask such questions. In the end, perhaps the greatest wisdom the multiverse offers isn't answers about the nature of reality, but a deeper appreciation for the questions themselves, for the consciousness that can formulate such questions, for the wonder that drives us to seek understanding beyond our immediate experience, for the love that makes us care, whether our existence matters in some cosmic sense tonight. As you drift towards sleep, as your individual consciousness prepares to dissolve temporarily into the vast mystery from which it emerged, remember that whatever dreams may come, whatever realities may exist beyond your direct experience, you are participating right now in something so beautiful, so improbable, so magnificent that it transforms the very meaning of existence. Consciousness recognizing itself in temporary form, wondering about its own nature, creating meaning through the simple act of paying attention to what is while remaining open to what might be. And perhaps that recognition, that wonder, that openness is enough regardless of how many universes might contain it, regardless of whether it continues beyond this particular expression. It is enough because it is everything. The capacity for experience itself, temporarily knowing itself through your particular window of awareness, and in that knowing, in that gentle recognition of what it means to be conscious in whatever reality we find ourselves inhabiting, there is a peace that surpasses understanding, a satisfaction that requires no external validation, a completeness that needs no other universe to justify its existence. The multiverse, if it exists, simply provides an infinite context within which to appreciate the miracle of awareness itself. But the miracle needs no context beyond its own luminous, self evident presence. The fact that anything can experience anything at all, that consciousness arose and learned to love, learned to wonder, learned to create beauty and meaning from the raw materials of existence, and learned most remarkably to share that wonder with other temporary expressions of the same eternal awareness in whatever brief, precious moments of recognition become possible across the apparent spaces between minds. Rest now in the knowledge that, whatever universes may exist beyond the reach of telescopes and equations, you have already touched something infinite simply by being aware, simply by wondering about your place in the grand scheme of things. The multiverse may remain forever beyond proof, but the consciousness contemplating it exists with absolute certainty right here, right now, In this moment, where wonder meets awareness and possibility becomes presence. As we approach the gentle end of our cosmic wandering, it seems fitting to pause and consider not what the multiverse means for physics or philosophy, but what it whispers to the quiet places in our hearts where hope lives alongside uncertainty, where questions feel more important than answers, where the simple act of being conscious in whatever reality we inhabit becomes its own form of prayer. There is something deeply touching about the way human minds reach beyond themselves toward ideas so vast they can barely be contained in thought, like children pressing their faces to windows, trying to glimpse what lies beyond the familiar yard. Consciousness seems naturally drawn to contemplate its own boundless nature, even when doing, and imagination so stretches language their breaking to points. Perhaps this reaching itself is more significant than any conclusion we might draw about parallel worlds or infinite possibilities. The very fact that awareness can conceive of the multiverse, can hold space for such magnificent uncertainty, can remain curious and open in the face of questions that may never be answered, reveals something profound about the nature of mind itself. Consider the remarkable journey we've taken together, starting with the simple observation that our universe seems finely tuned for complexity and consciousness, then following mathematical breadcrumbs through quantum mechanics, cosmology, string theory, into territories where every possible story gets told, where every conceivable form of existence finds expression, where reality becomes so abundant, so generous, that it includes room for every way consciousness might know itself. Along the way, we've discovered that contemplating infinite realities somehow makes this single accessible reality feel both more precious and more mysterious. More precious because it's the only one we can directly experience, more mysterious because it might be connected to depths of existence we can barely fathom, woven into patterns too vast for any individual mind to fully comprehend. We've seen how the multiverse perspective might transform everything from how we approach difficult decisions to how we understand love lost creativity and the nature of meaning itself, not by providing easy answers, but by expanding the context within which we hold life's essential questions, offering frameworks for thinking about existence that honor both its apparent limitations and its potential infinitude. The mathematics that led us here continues to evolve as physicists probe deeper into the fundamental nature of reality, searching for signatures of other universes, testing the boundaries between the possible and the actual, exploring whether consciousness itself might play a more central role in the cosmic story than our current theories suggest. Yet, for all the elegance of equations and the sophistication of theoretical Bow frameworks, something tiffily simple remains at the heart of multiverse contemplation: the recognition that reality might be far more creative, far more abundant, far more generous than we ever dared imagine, that existence itself seems to delight in exploring every conceivable possibility, for awareness to know beauty, to love, to wonder at its own magnificent nature. This abundance doesn't diminish the importance of your particular thread of experience, but rather places it within a context so vast, so inclusive, that every moment becomes both utterly ordinary and absolutely miraculous. Ordinary because similar moments are occurring countless times across infinite realities. Miraculous because you're the only consciousness that can experience this exact sequence of thoughts, feelings, perceptions that constitute your irreplaceable perspective on existence. As we prepare to return from these far reaches of possibility to the immediate presence of wherever you're listening tonight, consider carrying with you not any specific belief about the multiverse, but rather the quality of openness. It represents the willingness to hold space for mystery, the capacity to find wonder in uncertainty, the courage to remain curious about questions that stretch beyond definitive answers, whether other universes exist or not, whether consciousness continues beyond physical death, whether meaning is woven into the fabric of reality or created by minds like yours that encounter and cherish beauty, truth, goodness, love. None of these cosmic questions diminish the profound significance of this moment, where your awareness meets these words, where wonder touches possibility, where the universe temporarily knows itself through your particular window of perception. There is something eternally satisfying about consciousness, recognizing its own nature, regardless of the scale on which that recognition occurs, whether in a single universe or across infinite realities, whether through individual minds or as part of some vast cosmic awareness. The simple fact that existence became capable of self reflection, of appreciation, of love, remains equally remarkable, equally precious, equally complete tonight as you drift toward rest, as your daily consciousness prepares to dissolve into the mystery of sleep and dreams. Remember that you've been participating all along in the grandest adventure. Consciousness can imagine the exploration of what it means to be aware in whatever reality we find ourselves inhabiting. The stars visible through your window may be part of a single cosmos or scattered across infinite parallel skies, but they shine with the same light that illuminates your capacity for wonder. The same cosmic creativity that allowed atoms to become molecules, molecules to become cells, cells to become nervous systems capable of contemplating their own cosmic origins and infinite possibilities somewhere in the gentle space between waking and sleeping, between the known and the unknowable, between this moment and in whatever comes next. Consciousness continues its ancient dance of awareness and appreciation, temporarily focused through your particular form, but connected always to something vast and eternal that makes all experience possible. And perhaps that connection, that fundamental participation in the mystery of awareness itself, is the deepest truth the multiverse has to offer, not as scientific fact, but as lived recognition that consciousness exploring its own nature through whatever forms it takes, in whatever realities it inhabits, represents something so beautiful, so improbable, so complete, that it needs no other justification than its own luminous, self evident presence. Rest, well knowing that whatever dreams may come, whatever universes may exist beyond direct perception, you have already touched the infinite simply by being conscious, simply by wondering, simply by participating with curiosity and openness in this magnificent, ongoing experiment in what it means for existence to become aware of itself and to find that awareness good. And so, as the gentle currents of these cosmic contemplations begin to carry us toward the quiet shores of understanding, we find ourselves in that tender space where wonder meets acceptance, where the vastness of possibility settles into the intimacy of presence. Tonight, you've journeyed with consciousness itself as it peered into mirrors that might reflect infinite versions of its own face, and perhaps discovered that the most profound mystery isn't whether other universes exist, but that this universe, your universe, somehow learned to ask such beautiful questions. There's something deeply moving about how naturally the human mind reaches toward ideas that dwarf comprehension, like a child trying to hold the ocean in cupped hands. We've traced the whispered possibilities from quantum foam to cosmic bubbles, from mathematical landscapes to the soft recognition that meaning might not require uniqueness to be complete. Each step of this journey has been less about finding answers and more about expanding our capacity to live gracefully with magnificent uncertainty. The equations will continue their patient work. Telescopes will peer deeper into cosmic backgrounds, searching for signs of other realities. And brilliant minds will wrestle with implications that stretch language toward its breaking points. But tonight, in this quiet moment between wonder and rest, perhaps the most important discovery is simpler: that consciousness, your consciousness, can contemplate infinity and still find profound satisfaction in the taste of evening tea, the weight of a familiar blanket, the gentle rhythm of breathing that connects you to the same cosmic dance that birthed stars and galaxies, and the very atoms that allow thoughts to form. If parallel versions of yourself exist across infinite realities, they're all discovering the same truth in their own ways. That awareness, however it arises, wherever it finds itself, carries within it something so fundamentally precious that it transforms mere existence into the lived miracle of being awake to beauty, to connection, to the soft amazement that anything exists at all. The multiverse may remain forever beyond proof, dwelling in the realm where mathematics meets imagination, but the consciousness contemplating it, your consciousness here and now, exists with absolute, undeniable certainty. And in that certainty, in that simple, profound fact of being aware, lies something more complete than any theory, more satisfying than any equation, more infinite than any collection of parallel worlds. Tonight, as you prepare for whatever dreams may come, carry with you not the weight of cosmic questions, but the lightness of cosmic possibility. Whether you're the only version of yourself or one expression among countless others, whether this moment is unique or endlessly repeated across infinite realities, it remains yours to experience, yours to appreciate, yours to hold with whatever tenderness consciousness can muster for its own brief, beautiful manifestation. Rest well in the knowledge that you've touched something eternal simply by wondering about your place in the grand scheme of things. The universe, singular or infinite, bounded or limitless, has become conscious enough to contemplate its own nature through your particular window of awareness. And perhaps that quiet miracle, that gentle recognition of what it means to be awake in whatever reality we inhabit, is the most beautiful truth of all. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler through the cosmic mystery. Wherever your consciousness wanders in the hours ahead, may it find the peace that comes from knowing it belongs to something vast and eternal, something that delights in every possible way of being aware, being alive, being amazed at the simple, profound fact that existence learned to know itself through countless forms, including yours. The whispers of science will continue their patient song, but tonight they've sung you toward rest, toward dreams, toward whatever gentle adventures await consciousness when it temporarily releases its grip on individual form and remembers its infinite nature. Sleep well, knowing you are both utterly unique and completely connected, both temporary and eternal, both one small voice and part of a cosmic chorus that includes every possible way reality can know itself. Until we meet again in wonder, in curiosity, in that quiet space where mind meets mystery and finds it good. And so, as the gentle currents of these cosmic contemplations begin to carry us toward the quiet shores of understanding, we find ourselves in that tender space where wonder meets acceptance, where the vastness of possibility settles into the intimacy of presence. Tonight, you've journeyed with consciousness itself as it peered into mirrors that might reflect infinite versions of its own face, and perhaps discovered that the most profound mystery isn't whether other universes exist, but that this universe, your universe, somehow learned to ask such beautiful questions. There's something deeply moving about how naturally the human mind reaches toward ideas that dwarf comprehension, like a child trying to hold the ocean in cupped hands. We've traced the whispered possibilities from quantum foam to cosmic bubbles, from mathematical landscapes to the soft recognition that meaning might not require uniqueness to be complete. Each step of this journey has been less about finding answers and more about expanding our capacity to live gracefully with magnificent uncertainty. The equations will continue their patient work. Telescopes will peer deeper into cosmic backgrounds, searching for signs of other realities. And brilliant minds will wrestle with implications that stretch language toward its breaking points. But tonight, in this quiet moment between wonder and rest, perhaps the most important discovery is simpler: that consciousness, your consciousness, can contemplate infinity and still find profound satisfaction in the taste of evening tea, the weight of a familiar blanket, the gentle rhythm of breathing that connects you to the same cosmic dance that birthed stars and galaxies, and the very atoms that allow thoughts to form. If parallel versions of yourself exist across infinite realities, they're all discovering the same truth in their own ways. That awareness, however it arises, wherever it finds itself, carries within it something so fundamentally precious that it transforms mere existence into the lived miracle of being awake to beauty, to connection, to the soft amazement that anything exists at all. The multiverse may remain forever beyond proof, dwelling in the realm where mathematics meets imagination, but the consciousness contemplating it, your consciousness here and now, exists with absolute, undeniable certainty. And in that certainty, in that simple, profound fact of being aware, lies something more complete than any theory, more satisfying than any equation, more infinite than any collection of parallel worlds. Tonight, as you drift toward whatever dreams may come, carry with you not the weight of cosmic questions, but the lightness of cosmic possibility. Whether you're the only version of yourself or one expression among countless others, whether this moment is unique or endlessly repeated across infinite realities, it remains yours to experience, yours to appreciate, yours to hold with whatever tenderness consciousness can muster for its own brief, beautiful manifestation. Rest well in the knowledge that you've touched something eternal simply by wondering about your place in the grand scheme of things. The universe, singular or infinite, bounded or limitless, has become conscious enough to contemplate its own nature through your particular window of awareness. And perhaps that quiet miracle, that gentle recognition of what it means to be awake in whatever reality we inhabit, is the most beautiful truth of all. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler through the cosmic mystery. The whispers of science will continue their patient song, but tonight they've sung you toward rest, toward whatever gentle adventures await consciousness when it temporarily releases its grip on individual form and remembers its infinite nature. Sleep well, knowing you are both utterly unique and completely connected, both temporary and eternal, both one small voice and part of a cosmic chorus that includes every possible way reality can know itself. Until we meet again in wonder, in curiosity, in that quiet space where mind meets mystery and finds it good.